Hatch Brothers Trading Post.
A few years back, they didn't talk English, most of them, and that's why they had their mail come to these different trading posts, whatever area they lived in. And it's pretty hard for one of them to go to travel to a post office and get his mail there, and chances are the postmaster couldn't talk Navajo.
I go around here, go to town, and see these girls and boys working in the hardware stores and in the cafes and whatnot. And once in a while I'll speak to them in Navajo. And so many of them don't even know their own language. They understand a little bit of it, but they can't speak it. And so when I do speak to some of them up at Farmington that's working in the stores or in the cafe or someplace like that, why, first thing they do is look at me and grin a little bit and say, "You must be an old trader." Because they don't know that much about their language themselves anymore.
The Hatch Brothers Trading Post does not charge interest on any grocery bills. The only time that Stewart did charge interest was when he used to accept pawn, and that was 30 years ago.
When they used to pawn on the reservation, they never charged any interest on it. If they pawned their silver belt for groceries, and they'd just get the things they really need at that time, and then when they ran out, maybe they come in and get a little bit more.
They had a lot of beautiful jewelry, and they always kept it here in pawn, but it was also a way of security. As long as it was here, they knew it'd be safe. But if they had a dance coming up, a squaw dance or Yebiche dance or the big fair at Shiprock, they'd always come in and say, "Can we borrow our jewelry?" So I'd charge them so much a day and loan them their jewelry, and they'd go to the fair and do whatever. And when they got through, they'd bring it back, put it back in here where they knew it'd be safe. Isn't it? It was a great thing to be with the Indian people, learn their way of life and whatnot.
As the economics of the reservation change, so does the quality of life.
All the beautiful bracelets and jewelry, like the kind you've seen around here before, well, they lost them all. They'd go, maybe they live 100 miles out on the reservation, and time they caught a ride and had the money and go back after it, why, it's too bad, it's too late. Nothing they could do, it had already been sold. So they lost it. All that beautiful beads and stuff has disappeared. Now what they have is just this cheaper stuff. You've seen beads and things, imitation and nickel, silver, and all that. And in fact, they don't even wear much jewelry anymore. Navajo's getting away from it.
Even the older people?
It used to really, yeah, and the older people are afraid to wear it because they said if they happen to be around town, somebody allowed to yank it off from you.
I know years ago, when we'd get to where we could buy some real good turquoise and silver jewelry, we bought the very best because we were going to sell it to the Indian, and he wouldn't have it over a week until he'd bring it back in and say, "Hey, I want to borrow money on this." So you bought good stuff because he was going to bring it back and you had to loan him money on it. If he found out that that stuff was no good and you tried to rook him on the price of it or something, you lost his business. He knew what was going on.
In the 21st century, the Hatch Brothers Trading Post retains the business practices of the 19th century.
I noticed too that when somebody asks for something, you personally take it down off the shelf and get it for them and put it on the counter, and you know, you really have this relationship going with the customer. I wonder
Yeah,
if there's not something there.
Well, that's the way the trading posts were in the old days. It was all done that way, you know, and most of them now, they did away with the counters, and so people go there and they can kind of gather what they want, and like get a loaf of bread or things setting out where it's available. But I just kept this the way it is because I was here alone most of the time and made it easier that way to wait on one customer at a time. And then we never was rushed anyway.
Our store was built just like Stewart's was, as what we call the bullpen here. And there's always a stove in it to keep them warm, but you have to, everything we like to call the stuff and put on the counter for them. We didn't let them get behind there. That's the way the posts are entirely different now. They go get what they want off the shelf and take it and get it and buy it at a counter just like we do in town.
But the old way of doing business with these people is gone. They want to go to town to Walmart and Safeway, and of course there's got to be somebody around to buy a rug now and then. But the younger women, they're not weaving rugs anymore. Once in a while there's a few of these younger people that's weaving, and when they do weave, they weave it out of the yarn that they can buy at the store. A wool yarn, it's all wool, but it's already spun for them. And so the old Indian trading post like Stuart Hatch is up there. When Stuart gets through, that'll be all of it there, unless one of his boys goes in, but I doubt if they will because the people are all going to town and they're not making the rugs. And
Here's a 2 Gray Hill rug that of the older type, and you can see the wool hadn't been spun as fine as they do, as they become to do it nowadays. When we opened this store here, they didn't have a bridge below us, and the Navajos forded the river in wagons. And that's when every family had a wagon and team and horses, horseback. They had a crossing, Upper Fruitland had a crossing about a mile above us. They crossed the river there, and the wagon road came right in front of us here. And from the hogback this way, Lower Fruitland, they crossed right straight across here. They had what they call a ford. You can't just cross at any place, you know. It has to be a place kind of on a riffle. And back then, the merchandise, the Navajos, the things that they bought around a trading post was just very simple. Didn't just a little flour and a little coffee and sugar. They didn't even buy potatoes. They didn't even, my dad told me you couldn't give a potato away. They didn't know what it was. Said they had a potato of their own that they gathered out on the desert somewhere.
Stewart still carries the old-time favorites for his steady but diminishing customers.
Customers come into a trading post, they travel quite a ways in a wagon to get there, you know.
Right.
And they'd bring their family, the man and his wife and the kids. And when they got to the trading post, as soon as they come in, the trader would open usually a big can of tomatoes. It's a 2.5 size, like this size here. And they had spoons that they'd open that and they'd put a scoop of sugar on top of it, and they'd give them enough spoons for how many ever in the group, and a box of crackers. And they'd go out and make a spread and sit down and eat. and then they'd come in and trade later.
Grace Toglina and her daughter Nancy Martin have been shopping at Stewart's since the 1950s.
You know, like today's convenience store, you know, everything's just rush, and when you come to the old trading post, you know, you have a sense of home, you know, everything you've known for all your years. Like for me, since I've been a little girl, you know, my mom brought me to the trading post here, and she's worked up here at the school, the Ninanizad boarding school, and it's just a homey atmosphere. And with Stuart Hatch, you know, we've known him all our lives, it seems like, so it's nice to be here and nice to be home. In today's life, there's no honesty, no honorship. You know, there's no honor in what people have acquired. Like here, you can see in his trading post, he's got jewelry that, you know, there's a history behind each piece, and all the stuff that he has up here, you know, and the old boxes, you know, like they're almost antiques, and that's what we grew up with. And the antiques we see here is almost everything that we have in our grandmother's house, or, you know, like at our mom's shack, you know, in her storage shed and stuff. So it seems like, you know, everything is a part of growing up. That's what it is. And when you go to a convenience store, everything's just brand new.
Each little area, they make different rugs. Years ago, Shiprock was famous for their yei, they call them, ceremonial rug. And most of them had a white background that came from that area. And that's what most of the weavers around the Shiprock area made those little white yeis. Our whole thing has changed about 3 different times, you know, or more. People pass away, and then maybe their family still continue to trade because they did, and I guess that's the way they do. Golly, yeah, the old ones, when I first opened up here, well, there are just very few left around that remember when I opened this place. Some of them think it's been here forever, you know. This is what they call a chief rug. In the older days, the Navajo men would part of their, they wore them like this, and part of their clothing, or they used it to keep warm by. But you've probably seen old photos where they were dressed with a chief rug. There's no two of them exactly alike, but they were all on this order. They had the cut off corners and the diamond in the middle, and stripes through it. They were kind of plain, the design. They come here for just the same things every time they come. The ones far out, you could almost just set it out yourself what they're going to buy, because you know what they want. They'll buy the same thing every time. You might have noticed that. They'll start out and they'll buy a sack of flour to make their bread with. Well, then they need baking powders and they need salt to go with that flour. And then they need coffee to drink when they get that bread made. And then after that, they'll need sugar to go with the coffee, and they'll either get canned milk or they'll buy coffee made. They drink a lot of fresh milk now, a lot of them. And then after that, they'll buy usually buy the kind of a variety of this, a couple of cans and 3 or 4 of these and Spam. And then they'll get pork and beans and some of that beef stew. You ever see salt bacon?
No, not like that. Never.
Salt bacon. No, we get it in. It comes from Albuquerque. Where we get it.
I'd go back to the trading post tomorrow if it were like it was when I grew up. It was quiet, it was peaceful, it was beautiful, everybody was friendly. I could go any place I wanted without any fear. And we learned lots of things. The Indian people were good to us, and they were our friends, they were our people. We belonged to them.
Looking back on it now, I don't know of anybody that had more experiences and more fun than a feller that become an Indian trader, trading with the Indians, buying their rugs, being their legal advisor, being their medicine man at some times, and just the association that an old trader would have with the Indians was a great thing. It was something that nobody else in the world will ever experience except the old Indian trader. And I guess myself and Stuart Hatch up here is the only two that's left that has experienced all this. And it's been a wonderful life.
Other trading posts have shut down. We passed the Fruitland trading post. That's shut down. Like Mom, she doesn't really want to shop. She just wants to visit. You know, that's the thing. Get to know, reminisce about the old days.
How long do you see this trading post staying here and continuing?
You mean like it is now? Well, I don't really know what'll happen to it after I leave, and so I can't really say. One thing I do know is that it just about played itself out, the trading post, because the older people are all dying off, and the younger ones, this doesn't mean anything to a younger person now, because they'd rather go to town and do like Anglos or anybody else. They shop the same as anybody else. To come here and ask for a can of this and crackers, they'd think that's silly, you know, or they wouldn't even do it, I guess. But the older people do. They like to buy one item at a time and kind of take their time. And that's the way it all used to be years ago. And so I don't know about how long this will be here now. I've been here for 50 years, and I always tell them I'm going to run it for another 50. So, but that's not in the book, so I don't know. And there's been a lot of changes, and everything changes fast now, really fast.
Like what?
Well, they have the older people are better taken care of now than what they used to be, and they have houses and no use much to come here anymore for hardly anything. But
this old trader, this old post, this old life we love in the land of the Navajo. These old dreams, yesterday's gone by, different way of life, a different way to try. Time's fading fast, like the setting sun. Only memories remain. This old trader, this old post, this old life we love in the land of the Navajo. These old dreams, yesterday's gone by, a different way of life, different way to try. Time's fading fast, like the setting sun.